I hope you recall what we wanted to learn at that moment was how can we collectively plan a participatory process, but how can we plan activities so that they serve multiple goals, what they do in reality. And we start from the Agnas project of Christophe. And the situation we dealt with at that moment was how do you deal with constraints in such a process. We began with looking at 9 ways that Christophe within Agnas, or Agnas in general, deals with these constraints. 2 that I pick out is one that he starts with defining a structure, sort of this, a negotiation structure. Which teams do we need? Who is in which team? And very important, he has a coordination platform in which he engages the intermediate partners, intermediate bodies from the start. So in a lot of participatory projects, they come only somewhere halfway or in the end. He says we need an agreement from these intermediary organizations from the start. What I also recall and what we worked on in this session was he worked with an iteration of research, getting feedback, research, getting feedback. It was quite how do you call it, a distant iteration, meaning they did the research, others gave the feedback, and during the session we looked at ways to make this more interactive. How can we engage more stakeholders in the research and maybe integrate research and feedback. We listened to Henrik Schulz, and he himself again gave a number of activities that they've been developing in their approach. I recalled or I wrote down 8. But maybe you wrote different ones, wrote down different ones. This is what I recall from his lectures. I will go through them one by one, maybe just to refresh. What we also did is what you see there on the wall. I see now it's sort of nicely sloped. is we wrote down all the activities, either from a case of Vlaanderen or Department Omgeving, or from an international case. This is from Kustzone, from Urban Catalysts, Slim Verdichten, Lab in Vivo, and so on. So what you see here, I already wrote down on the wall there. And we will work with it later today if we have the time. So these are also the hand-on activities that we will document in our final publication. So the idea of a walk. The walk as a method to explore how everyone looks at a particular region or how everyone approaches a challenge, in this case water. So then they walk through or follow the course of a creek to understand the relation between the landscape and the water. And principles, it had to be, he gave 8 principles on how you organize a walk. Another strategy or activity he uses is to combine visualization techniques. And why does he do that? Because the project he presented to us dealt with the regional scale. And for a lot of people, this regional scale is way too complex to understand. So then he said, combine different visualization techniques when you start about such abstract thing as a region, and in this case, topography, which is not easy to grasp for people. Choose for open images. In the beginning he said don't make difficult images or don't make perfect images. Later he corrected himself and he says use open images that people can sort of put their own story in the image. Don't make images that sort of block imagination. Another approach he had is the working with metaphors. What I recalled was interesting from this is that in a participatory process everyone has different expertise, and a metaphor introduces a language which everyone can share. So you don't use the language of one expert or another, but you introduce a metaphor to sort of come to a shared language. And in this case it was the coasts or the sea. There's no water at all in this region or no sea, but let's look at this region as a sea with a shoreline and harbors. And people can play very fast with a metaphor. This was a difficult one. And he said, go for the interested public. There was a question from one of you. We asked, how do you reach everyone? And he said, that's not my ambition. I go for those who are interested. And he immediately said afterwards, is because it's about a region. If you go for a very local issue, for a very specific issue, a specific location, maybe this representativity is more important. But when it's about something abstract as a region, he says go for the interested public. You can, of course, have critique on this. And another, what I recall is like after a walk or after a session, during the session, you just let people go with the flow. You don't make too much documentation or note down, but you say you have to end each session, in this case walking, with forcing or asking people to document the thoughts, the reflections they had during the activity. You first do this, you give them a particular way to do this, and only then you start a discussion. So first individual debriefing, and later you have a collective discussion. If you start with a discussion, your interpretation of what you did is colored by the discussion. You have to make clear what is decided, what is not decided, or what is open for discussion, what is not open for discussion. And he says, as a politician or as a coordinator of a participatory process, you don't have to be afraid of being very explicit of what is open for negotiation and what not, because in his opinion, people are used to deal with constraints. In their daily life, they do it the whole time. So just make clear what is open for negotiation. And then what I also found inspiring in the end is you don't always have to end a participatory process with suggestions, with proposals for policy, with strategies. You can also end with very open questions, which then can structure a debate or which can later be used to evaluate projects, to evaluate policy proposals. So that's what I recalled from Hendrik's presentation, and that's what also is hanging on the wall there as inspiration. We didn't collect during the workshops new activities from you. What we collected in the end was, but you see we only had 4 templates completed because the time was up. We ended again with asking you, what did you learn, what do you still want to learn? We also gave you a new version of our instruments, and what was the aim there? We gave you the situation. You first wrote down all challenges you experienced within this situation. You then proposed a number of goals that you wanted to achieve in your participatory process. You put them in a particular order, and then you chose 2 or 3 goals and you defined an activity to reach these goals. In that way, this activity serves multiple goals. And the idea behind, or it's based on a theory. So far, I never had the time to explain this theory, but I would like to take a bit of time to try to do this, because maybe it can inspire some of you again. So, according to these authors, collective learning is only durable or only interesting or will only have a learning result if it goes through a number of stages. This is theory, it's not practice. In practice, it's not so clean or clear as the stages are more blurred, but in theory, there are 4 stages. And the first one is what should be, what is, what could be, what can be. I will explain the stages based on the group or what we sort of, the process we came up in my group, because I know this process best. So recall, we had to redo the work of Christophe. So we worked on the AGNAS project. The challenge was clear, the agenda was clear, but we expected some sort of friction between 2 players, between the nature player and the agriculture player. And the assignment was, how can you sort of deal with this friction? And in our group, we defined a number of goals, and we made one activity, and I think as I understood, others also proposed a collective walk. It was even before Hendrik's presentation. So the red is about a collective walk. I will go through these activities to illustrate these 4 steps of a collective learning process. So the first 2, so what we propose is, we first have to define what are the constraints. We have to make it clear to everyone who participates. And then we want to gain insights in the ambitions, into the agendas of everyone. And how do we do this? We give them homework. We were inspired by our first lecturers, Klaus, who said you give homework, give a template homework to everyone, and only if they bring their homework they can take part in the process. So we asked them, we gave them a map, or we would like to give them a map, and they have to indicate what they think are very beautiful or interesting spots in this region. They have to explain why, and they have to indicate also on this map what they find more complicated or difficult elements of this region. And so what they do here is ideals. That's the first step. You have to make your participants dream about their ideal future. What would this region ideally look like? And why is this important? So they have to define what should be, because then you can define some sort of a normative framework. What is important on a normative level in relation to this region? For example, sustainability. For example, it has to be accessible. So these are very generic conditions, criteria that a project later has to deal or comply with. So that's the first step. The second step is we look at the facts. So people have been dreaming. Ideally, this is what the region should sort of look like or offer to everyone. What is? Then you check the facts. How is this region functioning in reality? What did we propose there? That's our collective walk. So everyone brings his homework. Then we go to all the points indicated on the map together. And in each point, you have to explain to everyone why you selected this point. And you can check in reality what this means. Everyone also has to explain, for example, the importance of a particular flower, of a particular piece of agriculture, of a creek, of this region. So you are trying to understand how this region is functioning at this moment. What is also the idea is, so okay, how is it functioning? What is functioning well? What is functioning less good? We want to increase the knowledge of everyone of how this region is functioning, and in the end, we also want to know what instruments are available to everyone. So these are all facts that you need to know. The third step is what could be. So you know the dreams of everyone, you know the facts, how everything is operating, only then you formulate scenarios. Scenarios which comply with these principles you defined, but also scenarios which are grounded in reality, because you first had a reality check. And within these two elements, you can then define scenarios. You had a proposal, but that's less relevant. And finally, you have actions. You define actions and concrete projects within one of the scenarios. So they start to talk about responsibilities, about budgets and timing. And the idea is that if you go through these 4 stages, that has been learned. I mean, collectively as a group. And in reality, of course, you go multiple times through this loop. I know Jan will say, sorry, this doesn't work in reality. In reality, it's more blurry. Maybe this stage comes before. It can be. But in theory, this is sort of what you need for a learning process. In practice, it's a bit more muddy. So, and that was the idea. I mean, I was in this group, so I could suggest, shouldn't you put this action a bit, or this goal a bit more there to comply with the theory? But you should, I think it's a good idea if you make a process planning to check, did we follow this or not? And why did we not follow this? There could be good reasons, but at least you have something that helps you planning a process. We will not go into this anymore today, but it's in fact the idea which was behind this last session. Okay, a last overview of what we did during the last 5 moments. We've been working a lot. So first, what is in our catalog? What does it look like now? We just discussed 5 situations. So situations which return in a lot of participatory processes, and which we hope, if you use the techniques we proposed here, you can become more capable in addressing. These situations will again be visualized in this way. It's the same person who visualized what is lying in front of you. So these are sketches. They will get into the detail that you see here. At 4 I have a meeting with Stan to go through his narrative again to sort of see, is it correct, but is it also useful for everyone. And I will do this with all the narratives. What we have more, so we do this for 5 cases. We have insight in 5 cases of Ruimte Vlaanderen, which will be visualized in the way I showed you. And we listen to 4, and today we will have number 5 international experts, from which we recall or which we summarized at least 5 or 6 activities which will be in the catalog. For example, the 8 principles to organize a walk. This will be one element in this catalog. So that's the first booklet we will make for you. The second booklet is the instruments. You see that we had 5 versions of these instruments, or during all the lessons, we kept on developing this instrument based on your feedback, based on the observations we had of you using this. We had 5, we teach you, or we hope, we gave you some tools to learn about 5 elements of a participatory process, and today we will help you to communicate about a participatory process to others. So what you also see is that at least last time and this time, or a lot of the cards always became smaller, and now finally the board also became smaller. We will give you, or some of you, the board home, or you can take it home. So we hope it became more and more useful and more readable in these five sessions. But you should be able to use this small board to do all these lectures. What I also have to say, with each of these lessons or lectures, there comes a script that we will develop. And we have a first version of the script today also. Okay. I don't know if there are questions so far. No? All clear? It's not the first time, so I hope it's clear. What will we do today? So how can you become more capable in collectively communicating about participatory process? Why do we think this is important? Actually learn you is how can you define your process and the ambitions of your process so clearly that others understand this. So how can you improve the clarity of what you write down on these cards? That's one thing. How can you make them so concrete that others can imagine what you mean with your project? So it's 2 things that we will sort of work on today. So to make them more understandable and to make them more concrete, the actions you define. We have the last case, the case of Jan. Is framed within Top NoordRand. It's a gigantic project, so I will simplify it a lot, and I will only focus on one element of this process. I don't think I have to explain or frame Top NoordRand, but at a certain moment, after I think 2-3 years, there were ambitions formulated, and within these ambitions, at the same moment, there were 5 werven. Sorry, the English words.
Construction sites.
Construction.
It's not construction.
But
It's not construction.
So it's 5.
It's the Google Translate version.
Yeah. Do you know the English words?
It's a set of combined
War.
actions.
Right.
Yeah, 5
So it's between
actions.
wharves and construction sites.
Okay.
It's an experimentation sites.
Okay.
I'll use the word project site. So there's defined 5 project sites which had to test the ambitions, the overall ambitions of this project. I will anyway maybe frame it a bit. So Top NoordRand this is Brussels. This is the north side of Brussels, and one of the challenges is there is somewhere there's 2 regions which have a different parliament, a different political structure. You have Brussels and you have Flanders, and this region sort of covers or belongs to both. And if you look at this region, there's somewhere the airport, I will frame it wrong, I think it's somewhere here. You have the canal with a lot of industry, you have the train track with a lot of industry, so you have a huge dynamic in this region. And if you would just look at this only from an economical viewpoint, Jan told me it's as important as the harbor in Antwerp, which is one of the most important economic centers of Flanders. So maybe if you look from this perspective at this region, it gives maybe different opportunities, possibilities to improve the quality of this economy, because there has been a lot of changes in this economy. A lot of it is informal, is maybe a bit on the downside, but if we use this other framing, maybe possibly, suddenly it becomes a huge driver or a very positive story. And that's one of the things that Top NoordRand is focusing on. So different political responsibilities, economy, and at the same time you have multiple municipalities, so it's a very complicated region. And this project is Project Buddha, and the idea there is to work on circular economy, because there is a concentration of informal economy. There used to be a big motor company which moved, which then left room for temporary economies, but which also needs a gentrification process. You have the canal and you have the question Jan is struggling with in his process is, how do you leave a participatory process at a certain point? Flanders takes the initiative here. No one asks any Flanders to, or the planning department to come there. So they thought there's an opportunity, we'll invite ourselves in there. Now things are going, but at a certain moment, as a planning department, you want to leave this process and hope it's taken over by others. So that's the challenge, I think, which is very recognizable for all of you. This is what I learned from the conversations with Jan, and I will want to try to do something different. I want to try to go through the narrative that Jenny has been making for us, to see if it already communicates with you. And we'll try to explain the actions that Jan has been introducing via this narrative. So the first, or the starting point is the steering committee of this overall project defines, Jenny wrote 4, but there should be five projects. So that's the starting point of the narrative. And then Jan has a particular idea. I still had to write it down. Jenny, we had not enough time to write Jan's reflections down, but said, okay, I don't know the area. I don't know what is happening there. I need to get to know the area. That's my first point. So maybe what I should do is I'll organize a summer school, or I'll help organizing a summer school, inviting international students tutored by CAS. The CAS is the Center for...
No, it's a name. It's Sir John Cass Faculty of the Arts.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah,
As part of London.
Yeah.
So, okay, by a university from London, organized a summer school. And this summer school also introduces a particular method that they work with in a lot of their projects. And this method starts from the idea you focus on what is valuable and not on what is not working. So you don't look for problems, you look for what is valuable. Jan has been stressing a lot that this is a key in the rest of the whole process. So what you see here is a lot of students are searching for what is valuable. At that moment, the area is huge. So it's not only, as far as I recall, the project Buddha, it's even bigger. Okay, Jan learns a lot from this, and he says maybe we need to make the area smaller. It's way too complicated for the students to understand, even for myself to understand. And we need to be located on site to do this mapping. Now they were located, if I understand well, here, and they sort of commute. So they organize a design workshop with students. It's in fact the same as before, but now students know one another. But why is this important? Because students are allowed to make mistakes. And for everyone who works and lives here, they accept this from students, that they maybe make a simplistic interpretation of what is going on there. But these mistakes can also help to trigger other perspectives. So the use of students is a very deliberate thing. I think we later will maybe hear similar stories from Calais. So okay, this results in what Jan calls lucky finds. So the students find elements which they think are very valuable, but which were maybe before regarded as, okay, negative. For example, a very high wall, if I recall well, and I think also the viaduct over. If you frame it differently, also I think the very big building of Renault, everyone wants to tear it down, but if you change the frame of looking at this building, maybe it becomes an identity for this place. Okay, maybe I have to speed up. At the same time, Jan chooses, not in this area, but in another area, to organize an intervention in a similar location with housing on one side and industry on the other side. So his one maybe recommendation is choose for interventions from the beginning. Why? To understand the type of area you're working in. Organize another summer school. The area gets smaller again. And what is interesting about this one is they stay on location, but you see here always a project owner and a student. So they always work with a project owner, someone who owns a location or a company on site. So the area always gets smaller, the contact with people active on the terrain gets bigger. So you still get lucky finds, but they're improved by students. So what is valuable, students add something to it, make it even more valuable. Another intermezzo, the first intermezzo, you do an intervention to understand what can be the relation between housing and industry. Another intermezzo is maybe we don't know enough still what is happening on site, or no one ever made a sort of an inventory of what is happening on site. So Jan asked a number of students to map every building and every interview, not every stakeholders, but a series of stakeholders, and to make a booklet over this. On all this information. Sorry, what was the... So you make a guide with stories, you map stories, you document stories of your region. And then we're in another, and as the final workshop, the area gets smaller again. We focus on one street now, and you see students all again work for one, not a client, but one stakeholder, for which they have to come up with a proposal, and all proposals have to make up one bigger story. What Jan told me is what he did is he limits his own role. He's of course also helping the students, but mainly making sure that all these green guys, the stakeholders, are there. And he checks the quality of what is produced. Are students saying very stupid things, yes or no? Then he intervenes, otherwise he tries to step back. This is the same for the publication. He doesn't say how. They have to map, but he sort of checks the quality of what is being proposed. And then this happens. So we have the airport, attacks in the airport and attacks in Brussels, and suddenly the perspective on this region also changes, because a lot of those who are responsible for what happens here come from this region. And on the one side, what Jan told me, it's again a simplistic version of what happened, but we need to be more repressive, but at the same time maybe we have to try to tell a positive story of this region. And suddenly what Jan has been doing gets support from local politicians. They want to help Jan with reframing how you look at this region. And then from that moment the design workshop stops, and all the input which is generated then is shared with municipalities and stakeholders. So he first brings the steering committee together, and then Jan tries to look how can we sort of begin in giving the story, handing the story over to local municipalities and local stakeholders. And then one idea he has is like, okay, we could finance a research which they define, but that's maybe not so durable. What we should do, we should look together for external funding. So Flanders doesn't pay, we look for European funding. And the nice thing, or the good thing about this European funding is that Flanders cannot ask this, the municipalities have to ask this. So suddenly they have to take the leading role and Jan only supports them. So everyone finds it a good idea. There's a number of conversations. There's a bit of more mapping of the region. In the end, after a lot of working, they don't go for this European funding, but they decide to go for, and then I maybe tell it again, simplistically, for a planning instrument which already existed the whole time, but the European funding sort of opened the eyes of all the stakeholders that there is a need to intervene in this region, and one of the players, the province of Vlaams-Brabant, proposes to introduce a planning instrument and a budget to help the local businesses to improve their industrial area to fit the idea of circular economy. And at this moment, they're trying to develop a new cooperation structure. This was in a fast pace through a very long process, from which I only highlighted a few points which I think are relevant for all of you, and which are relevant to answer this question: how do you at a certain moment hand over a participatory process? I think it would be good to have a bit of feedback from you now of how do you in your own processes try to hand over responsibility to others. You can also give feedback on how things are represented, feedback on Jan's process. The floor is yours. I'll just keep the time. Explore the script, check the readability of the script. So what I will do, I'll first explain the situation and then I'll run quickly with you through the script. I hope it speaks for itself. You've done it before, so I think it's quite easy to do. So workshop. So we redo the work of Jan and his team, at least a part of it. So we are again still in Brussels. We did all the design workshops, so we know what is working. The municipalities support us, so there's an interest. But now we say, okay, we worked enough here, we wanted to do another project, now it's up to the municipalities. So how do we hand over, maybe that's not the idea, but how do we give over the coordination role to the municipalities? And that's the question we give to you. Jan chose to maybe go for a European project, maybe you guys have other ideas. So how do you leave a participatory process without reducing the quality of this process? And I wanted to go with you through the script. So the one pager is a summary. And I learned that as a, it's not a coordinator, no, but so as a facilitator, you don't want to flip through pages. You only want to have one page. So that's why we try to summarize everything. And on the back you find what you need to do this workshop. So we already organized it for you. That's lying ready. So you are the begeleider, you're the facilitators. And then on the side with the squares, it's all the steps you have to go through. Round 1 is what you already did 4 times so far. Round 2 is something new. And round 2 has to do with this communication. So round 1 is what you as a facilitator, I don't know which 2 volunteers I will have, is the facilitator will have to introduce the situation I just sketched to you. And the goal of the activity you're going to design. Then you have 15 minutes of choosing a participatory activity. We'll go for a walk. Or we'll organize a walk, don't go for a walk. We'll organize a walk. And to make it a bit more difficult today, you have to pick one activity from the wall. So you cannot use your own imagination, you choose from what we learned in all the previous sessions. To show you, look, there's a bunch of inspiration, use it. It has been brought here for you. So you pick one, You write it down on the correct card, and then you start detailing the triangle, so the 6 ones below. I introduce it to you. I mean, the facilitators don't have to do so much, I guess, now. But if you don't understand, if this doesn't give enough information, in the end we will also make a layouted version of the longer scripts. There you can find a more detailed explanation of the actions you have to do. And in round 2, because we're only 2 groups, normally it would have been 4 groups, what I suggested is that you, let's say half the groups mix, and one group, as it says here, ask questions to the others. So half of that table go there, half of the other table go there, and the ones that move ask questions to the one that's remain at the table. Which questions you find in this one? And the questions are about improving the clarity of what has been written down, or making everything you write down more concrete. In order to then communicate about your plan, your action.